We'll go to the next paper by Dr. Ramesh Babu.
I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me for this talk. It's a great privilege and honor to be talking in front of some of my role models who are during my MS days in Calicut, Professor T.P. Joseph and Professor K.K. Verma, and Dr. Kesavan, who was my role model during my MCH days in Egmore. And I would also like to thank Professor Ravikumar, who has helped me throughout the preparation in various stages. Now, vesicular reflex has undergone a lot of changes, and the original conceptual model was based on the premise that presence of urinary tract infection and vesicular reflex was essential for renal scarring, and you have to prevent either one of those to prevent this renal scarring. So the prophylactic antibiotics or treating the UTI promptly prevents the UTI part, while surgery and correcting the vesicular reflex prevents the vesicular reflex part, thereby preventing the renal scarring and further sequelae like end-stage renal disease and hypertension. Now, with the advent of the multiple randomized controlled trials like Birmingham Reflex Study and the International Reflex Study, there has been a paradigm shift in the management of vesicular reflex. So what was initially thought to be responsible for this scarring changed over the years, and the congenital renal dysplasia and genetic factors were meant to be the main reasons for renal scarring. So the importance of urinary tract infection causing this renal scarring was felt that prompt diagnosis and treatment of UTI was enough, and maybe prophylactic antibiotics to prevent the recurrent UTI, and that should be enough to prevent renal scarring. So then became the role of vesicular reflex, whether should you identify it and treat it, that itself became questionable. So that then from the surgical management it became medical management, and further with the meta-analysis and Cochrane review, the evidence of the use of the antibiotic itself was being questioned, and prophylaxis was not associated with the decreased UTI, but in fact it is associated with increased resistant infections. So whether to identify this and treat VR itself became questionable, and with all these things, we are really confused regarding where we stand. So what do we do as surgeons? On one side, we have these randomized controlled trials, which form level 1 evidence about various medical, surgical, or no management at all. And on the other hand, we have our opinions formed by our understanding of our textbooks, our teachings by our professors, what we learned over the years of how to manage the vesicular reflex. So in this process, we wanted to find out what are the views of our surgeons, and what is the impact of these randomized controlled trials on the management of vesicular reflex, and does this practice vary in the Indian scenario. So what we did was we did a survey among IAPS Yahoo groups. A standard questionnaire was sent by email via groups as well as via individual mails. Practicing pediatric surgeons were included, trainees were not included, and there were multiple choice questions with more than one option whenever required. And between July 2013 and 2014, 700 members were emailed and 111 responses were obtained. What I would do is, I will tell a little bit about the literature and what are the controversies, and then what about the findings, and how we either agree or differ with the existing literature. So the Society of Fetal Urology consensus statement, which appeared on the management of antenatal hydronephrosis in the Journal of Pediatric Urology in 2010, they state that degree of dilatation does not correlate with the grade of the vesicular reflex. Normal postnatal ultrasonogram does not exclude a vesicular reflex. Incidence of vesicular reflux is up to 30% in children with antenatal hydronephrosis. However, they said there is no clear evidence to support or avoid imaging, and it's unproven whether identification and treatment of children with vesicular reflex, whether it concerns any benefit at all. The revised guidelines on the management of antenatal hydronephrosis published in Indian Journal of Nephrology in 2013. Particularly there were several guidelines, but the one was on the role of MCU to rule out vesico-ureteric reflux. They also mentioned the severity of antenatal hydronephrosis does not correlate with VUR. Patients with VUR may have a normal postnatal ultrasonogram. But what it differed with the previous guideline was they recommended MCU in moderate to severe hydronephrosis, even if it is more than 10 millimeter anteroposterior diameter at 4 to 6 weeks of age. So when we surveyed our IAPS members, among the respondents, the majority of them would do an MCU to look for vesico-ureteric reflux between 10 to 20 millimeter of diameter. Now, with the literature questioning the benefit of identifying VUR and any intervention at all if identified, should we reduce the number of invasive MCUs in these infants and newborns and probably restrict them to those where there is persistent hydroureteronephrosis on repeated ultrasounds? This is something which we need to ponder about. Coming to urinary tract infections and vesico-ureteric reflux, the important questions, although we don't get to see these, the primary people who see these are the pediatricians and the pediatric nephrologists or the physicians, we often get a referral before to start what evaluation to do, when to start, whether it is a single urinary tract infection. And there are a lot of questions. The revised American Academy of Pediatric Guidelines, published in 2011, said febrile infants with UTI should undergo renal and bladder ultrasonography, but an MCU should not be performed routinely after the first febrile UTI. And it should be done if warranted, if ultrasound shows hydronephrosis or findings that indicate you have vesico-ureteric reflux. Now, this is an Indian statement which appeared in the Indian Pediatrics by the Indian Society of Pediatric Nephrology. They come up with a revised statement. Initially, it appeared in the year 2001, and then it was revised, although there was not much revision. The statement came again in 2011, which divided them into 3 groups. After the first urinary tract infection, they put them in age less than 1 to 5 years, and more than 5 years. If it is less than 1, a child with UTI will undergo an ultrasound, MCU, as well as a DMSA. After between 1 to 5 years, they'll do a DMSA first, and if it is positive, they'll do an MCU. And if it is more than 5 years, they'll do an ultrasound only. What this recommendation did not elaborate on is what is a recurrent UTI, what is what exactly is the UTI. It's a culture positive, but they didn't go to the extent of febrile or recurrent, that business. The NICE guidelines from UK complicated things further. They divided them into 3 different groups, less than 6 months, 6 months, 3 years, and more than 3 years. But what they introduced was 2 more concepts, atypical UTI and a recurrent UTI. So atypical UTI is where there is sepsis or a mass palpable or renal impairment is there, or it's a non-E. coli UTI. But they come up with one definition which can be useful for us also. A recurrent UTI is where there is 1 pyelonephritis and 1 cystitis, or 2 pyelonephritis, or 3 cystitis. So they come up with this complicated diagrams where DMSA and MCU is done only in the presence of atypical and recurrent UTI, even in those less than 6 months. And in those between 6 months to 3 years, they do only DMSA and only if it is positive MCUG. And for over 3 years, they do DMSA only if it is a recurrent UTI. So it is even more strict guidelines in UK. Now this top-down or bottom-up, top-down is where we do DMSA first and then the MCU, and bottom-up is the other way around. When we did a survey among about what we are practicing, most of us are doing MCU first. Around 50% of us are doing MCU first. Around a third of us are doing, we follow the flow chart of IAP, where we do a DMSA first and then MCU first. This probably is a better approach because it avoids a lot of invasive MCUs and reduces the radiation, and probably is the better approach because this top-down approach, you can do the DMSA, which is less radiation, and reassure them if it is normal. It spares a lot of children the MCU. Antibiotic prophylaxis, another controversial area in vesico-ureteric reflux. Now, Williams in his systematic review said evidence on use of antibiotics to prevent recurrent systematic UTI is weak, and another review said antibiotic prophylaxis is not associated with decreased risk of UTI, but associated with increased risk of resistant infection. However, the Swedish reflux study, which compared the prophylaxis endoscopy group and surveillance felt that the UTI is actually more when you are just doing surveillance, particularly in girls, and prophylaxis or an intervention like an endoscopic intervention was worthwhile in reducing the incidence of pyelonephritis. This is the latest study which appeared in the New England Journal in 2014, randomized intervention for children with vesicular reflux. And a lot of people in the West were actually waiting for the outcomes of this study. And what it said was antibiotic prophylaxis was associated with a substantially reduced risk of UTI recurrence. It reduces the incidence of pyelonephritis, although it doesn't affect the renal scarring. Now, what we practice is like this. When we surveyed, our respondents were like, in all grades, we are starting antibiotic prophylaxis, around 70% of them. Very few of them don't start antibiotic, and around 30% of them start in grade 3 to 5 reflux, which is a dilating reflux. Now, the American guidelines are slightly going towards this, where you give antibiotic prophylaxis in dilating reflux, which is grade 3 to 5, and possibly this is a better approach. Once started antibiotics, when do we stop antibiotic prophylaxis? This is another difficult question for us whenever the patient is on the medical management. In the US, what they were doing is they initially were practicing a lot of antibiotics. They did 2 MCUs before actually they proved that the VUR is gone. So 2 MCUs have to be negative before they stop. That was the initial thing. Then they moved away from this antibiotic prophylaxis and they stopped giving antibiotic prophylaxis at all. In the UK, on the other hand, what they were doing is they just stopped the antibiotic prophylaxis when the child reaches the age of toilet training, that is like 2.5 to 3 years. So when we surveyed it, most of us are saying that we repeat an MCU and then if it is negative, we'll stop antibiotic prophylaxis. With reducing MCUs and antibiotics always, whether we should change this approach is something questionable. Voiding dysfunction. It's a bit like chicken and an egg. What came first, whether the voiding dysfunction comes first or the UTI comes first and then the cystitis causes the voiding dysfunction. But it's well known that the constipation and dysfunctional voiding can be a factor in recurrent urinary tract infection and vesicular reflux. Do they need urodynamics? This is an important question which we asked in our survey. Not routinely is the answer we got. Urodynamics is indicated when the history is strongly suggestive or when there was thickened bladder on the ultrasound. Management of vesicular reflux. This is a simplified part of the AUA guideline, which is only a part of the guideline. Essentially what they are trying to say is that the lower the grade, lower the age, and there is no scarring, prophylactic antibiotics, whereas the higher the grade or more scarring, they do surgery. They also come with a rider that the recommendations generally lack empirical scientific support and reflect clinical experience and opinion of the panel. Now, what they try to say is the benefit of surgical treatment is there when the patient is more than 1 year old for bilateral grade 3 to 4 or 5 reflux or in the presence of renal scarring. Whereas it is not there in grade 1 to 2 reflux or when there is no scarring. Now, whether these patients should undergo a sting procedure instead of an antibiotic prophylaxis or no prophylaxis, there is no consensus on this. Now, this is the Children's Hospital Boston VUR calculator. So, for an individual patient, you need to know what to do. This gives a little bit of a guide. Like you can enter the various details, like a girl with a bilateral VUR or urinary tract infection, what is the presentation, whether the age at presentation is less than 1 year, whether it is a single system or duplex system. And you can also ask for the time to resolution, whether it is for 2 years for a reflux of grade 4 to 5. And once you enter, we come up with a number like this. There's a 26% chance to resolve. Whether it is useful to counsel the parents, we do not know. So based on our survey findings, when to intervene in vesicular reflux, most of the common indications we all agree are all there, and the biggest support is for breakthrough UTIs, worsening of the scars, bilateral grade 4 to 5, and reflux in older child. But also in addition, we have an intervention indication in poor compliance. This is probably a relative indication, but this is unique to India. Coming to sting, What grade of vesicular reflux is suitable for sting? Most of our survey respondents felt grade 3 is the best, followed by grade 2. And why is it not popular in India? The reasons are mainly the expense, followed by the lack of instruments, the failure rate of sting, and not routinely practicing sting. These are some of the reasons which were given why it is not being used. Now, this is another important question we asked. What is the lowest age for a safe reimplantation? Among our survey respondents, the commonest is 12 months. After 1 year only, they will consider it as a safe age for reimplantation. Many of them would say that even 18 months, but very few of them said they will do reimplantation in a child less than 12 months. So what do you do in a 4-month-old boy with the grade 4 vesicular reflux with the recurrent breakthrough UTIs? This is very rare scenario, but once in a while you can end up with a patient like this who is having a lot of UTIs, VOR is there, you don't want to reimplant. So the options given were like circumcision as the first choice because it's a boy child, and then the other options were ureterostomy, continue the conservative management, recycle the antibiotics, or very few of them said that they'll go for reimplantation or a sting. Familial VOR. 32% of siblings and 66% of offsprings have reflux in the family. Should we screen them all? Should we do only younger sibling screening, or if we screen only for symptomatic ones? What do we use to screen? Should we use only an MCU? What is the role of nuclear cystogram? Whether that is enough with a lesser radiation risk. Now, on sibling screening, our survey shows a lot of mixed picture. A third of them say they don't screen, a third of them say they'll screen all, and a third of them will say that they'll screen younger sibling. But when you ask what you'll use, they're saying ultrasound first, which is not a specific test. So this is one area where we could actually sit together and come up with some guideline. Voiding urosonogram, we have acquired this machine in our hospital. It's a dedicated low MI contrast machine with the ultrasound contrast agent, the SonoView. SonoView is the aqueous solution of sulfur hexafluoride gas microbubble. So this is 1 ml is mixed with 100 ml of normal saline and or 20 ml of normal saline according to the bladder capacity, and injected into the bladder via a catheter. And you can see that appearing there, that ureter is showing up and reflux is there in the kidney. So that is less radiation, non-invasive test. So that is something which we can think about. Impact of randomized controlled trials. So I've been through this already. I just want to summarize a little bit about what it said. The RCTs, Birmingham study said there is no difference in UTI between renal growth and scars. International reflux study said the scars are same but lower pyelonephritis. The River study said the reduced pyelonephritis but not renal scarring. So what do we feel about the various solutions? So this is what we found. Majority of us feel that prophylaxis will reduce pyelonephritis, but it does not reduce scar, or less of us feel that it reduces scar. But surgery, we feel that it reduces pyelonephritis and renal scarring. Now, literature also agrees that the prophylaxis as well as surgery reduces pyelonephritis. We also feel the same. Is it not worthwhile reducing the incidence of pyelonephritis? Surgeons should have clear views and have proper evidence to guide parents. Parents of children with vesicular reflux prefer antibiotic prophylaxis as initial treatment. However, when daily antibiotics and yearly MCU was advised for 3 to 4 years, most of them choose definitive correction. So we should be able to provide a balanced approach with pros and cons scenario for each intervention and try to modulate treatment based on the available literature. So to summarize a little bit about what everything is, the evidence versus practice versus what we could come up with some change is, like the evidence says in antenatal hydronephrosis, there is no clear evidence to evaluate for vesicular reflux. We really don't have much consensus, although we practice an MCU in all 10 to 20 millimeter hydronephrosis. whether we should reduce the number of MCUs and do it only for dilating hydronephrosis or persistent hydronephrosis. UTA and VUR, it's becoming less and less evaluation and doing DMSA first. We are still doing MCU first, maybe because DMSA is not widely available. Whether we should follow a flow chart or whether we should change to doing DMSA first is something which we need to come up with. Then antibiotic prophylaxis, there is becoming decreasing evidence. Our survey shows that most of us start antibiotic prophylaxis in all grades. Should we be restricting to grade 3 to 5 and spare those ones with the grade 1 to 2? That is something which we need to come up. And the role of interventions, surgery, sting is becoming even less. So I think it's high time we come up as a group with some guidelines or a consensus statement at least to come up with the management of this complex issue so that we can ourselves come up with some solid views to guide our patients. Thank you for all those who participated.
Yeah, Dr. Rambab. I'm Dr. Miglani from Amritsar.
Yes, sir.
This is as you said, it's a confusing subject, even further confusing.
Absolutely.
As we are discussing, we are getting confused further and further. I just want to have a case-specific discussion, which I put on Yahoo group also. I have a baby 1 month old who was diagnosed antenatally with bilateral hydronephrosis and investigated soon after birth for postureo valves in Army Hospital, Delhi. And then he came to us and he was having grade 4 reflux on the right side and grade 3 reflux on the left side, on the right side, left side. So he came with we started him on prophylactic antibiotics, did his DMSA, it was normal. And then he came with a resistant breakthrough infection, febrile UTI, vomiting, and did not accept feed and all. So we admitted him with started with injectable antibiotics. And then when the report of the culture sensitivity came, we realized that all the antibiotics, he's resistant to all of them. So there I decided that I should do some diversion so that urine should flow and his infection should be washed out. So I decided to do a vesicostomy. Okay. I got several opinions from several people. Somebody was saying right ureterostomy, left ureterostomy, bilateral ureterostomy, and so on and so forth. So I decided on a vesicostomy. And after a few months of vesicostomy and constant prophylactic antibiotics, again he had febrile UTI. And we changed the antibiotic, he got resolved. He had 4 febrile UTIs in 4 months. So at the 5th UTI, I again investigated with the DMSA, and then he was showing some scarring, initial scarring in the right kidney. So I had to rethink what to do now. Then I did a right ureterostomy also. Now he has got a vesicostomy as well as right ureterostomy. And so far it's been a month or maybe 1.5 months. So far he's doing fine. He's gaining weight again, normal, except that he's leaking urine from 2 places now. Now what to do further? Should I go in for a reimplant and close the ureterostomy? Or should I continue with antibiotics till 1 year of age? Should I go for sting? What to do?
This is the most difficult question we also surveyed. And the general literature, what it says or what we feel also is, like reimplantation is best deferred till 1 year of age. Until that time, it's possible you try to rotate antibiotics, prophylaxis with either Septran or something else or nitrofurantoin and then try to tide over the crisis, or you have to go for a diversion. That is safer than do a reimplantation.
Yes, that's
what a diversion should work. I don't know why in your case it didn't work.
No, that's what we are doing. We are trying to buy time by diversion so that he becomes around 1 year of age. And I mean, can I go for an early closure of vesicostomy so that his bladder should develop and later on go for a...
Well, I would have done a ureterostomy only. In a refluxing system, unilateral ureterostomy should be able to do it better.
No, I can revert to that what you are saying now.
Possible, yeah.
Dr. Miglani,
yes, sir.
you can continue the discussion
yes.
out of this room. We are already late.
Nobody else.
Can we ask...
Specific questions.
One more, two
I would
more.
like to make one point.
Yes.
For the last 3 years, we have been using oxybutynin. It's a detrusor relaxant, and we have found that initially we used to do almost 2 reimplantations every month. Now, I have limited it to 1 every year. So there's a dramatic improvement, and in fact we have saved several reimplantations because of oxybutynin.
I think Professor Kesavan has showed me a few cases and actually taught me this trick. I do not know how it works before you establish this any bladder or hyperactivity, but it works. Whether to put these children on oxybutynin with a normal looking bladder, I don't know, but it works in some.